Many may not know this, but Illinois youth prisons are especially carceral and abysmal compared to other models of youth justice, um, essentially in other parts of the country and other states. And up next to talk about this is Felipe Franco, who will talk to us about the close to home model, which counters the carceral system of prisons and shows us that it's possible to close prisons and to have a prisonless world with alternatives tailored to the needs of marginalized communities. And especially localized communities. So a little bit more about Felipe. He is a senior fellow of young adult practice at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. As deputy commissioner, as Deputy Commissioner of the Division of Juvenile Justice and Opportunities of Youth, he was instrumental in transforming New York State juvenile justice system, where the number of youth in placements was reduced, permitting the closure of 21 youth prisons. Then as Deputy Commissioner of the Division of Youth and Family Services in New York City's Administration of Children's Services, from 2014 to 2019, Felipe oversaw a wide range of programs and services for youth and families in the juvenile justice system. In the juvenile justice system. With Close to Home, he helped prove that the nation's largest city can move young people out of state prisons and back to the community with the right support, while while reducing youth delinquency and improving public safety. So everyone give a virtual round of applause and some comments to Felipe.
Hi, everyone. Can you see me? Can you hear me? And I think we have a deck of some slides that will help me give you a little bit of a sense of the history of Close to Home. Okay, the first one I think is kind of giving you a sense of what the facilities look like. And keep in mind that actually before 2012, about 350 young people from New York City didn't used to be in facilities of this sort. They used to be in large institutions, most of them actually housing more than 75 young people, and many of them being actually 5 or 6 hours away from New York City. Although we had actually done a significant amount of reforms in New York State and actually had begun testing the idea of having young people be in their neighborhood and community with the opening of a previous program called Brooklyn for Brooklyn. We moved that forward in a unique moment in history back in 2012, where the governor, in that moment, Governor Cuomo, my boss, and the mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, actually had agreed in working together in creating a new system for young people in New York City. Maybe we can go to the next slide. One of the things that actually was particularly challenging for many of us, particularly in my role first in New York State as a deputy commissioner, and later on, to my surprise, as a deputy commissioner implementing Close to Home in New York City under the de Blasio administration, was that we were creating something that was better. And we were particularly concerned that creating a new set of facilities, particularly ones that actually were appealing, as you saw the picture before, may increase the likelihood of young people being removed from their homes, which is something that none of us wanted. Before Close to Home became a reality, a significant amount of work took place in New York City, led by the Department of Probation and our courts, to create a structured decision-making process that ensured that removal from home was the last option in our juvenile justice system. And only those kids that actually pose a risk to the community, which is sometimes hard to prove anyway, were gonna be placed in Close to Home, close to their families, close to their communities, and for the least amount of time possible. But to our surprise, even after opening these shiny new facilities, stakeholders did what they had promised to do and kept young people with their families and began using Close to Home as a last resort, as you can see in the numbers from 2012 to 2016. The next one. So I think it's important to keep in mind that close to home was more than just a new set of facilities, all of them within the community. It actually required, which I think I alluded before, many stakeholders, including community and young people, to think differently about why should someone should ever be separated from their loved ones. And if they should be separated from their loved ones, to ensure that actually they can sustain contact on a weekly basis, being close to their family. An important part of close to home was to ensure better outcomes around education for young people in the juvenile justice system. I have to admit that the outcomes at the Office of Children and Family Services in New York State were poor, to say the least. And we knew that actually most young people who were in our large facilities, institutions, youth prisons, first of all, had little chance of their credits being accredited or actually taken into consideration when they came to New York City. There was no alignment between the work that actually was happening in the institutions and the work that young people had to do when they came back home to the community schools. And we didn't provide the network of opportunities that actually would meet the needs of young people. An important element of close to home, and possibly our most important partner in the creation of the close to home initiative, was the Department of Education in New York City, that actually stepped up and created a new set of schools, one in Brooklyn and one in the Bronx, that allow young people to have a normalized, sort of a normalized experience, going every day to school outside their group home and being able to access services like young people access in any other school in New York City. Also allow for the Department of Education, for the first time ever, take responsibility, not just of educating young people who are close to home, but actually assigning them a transitional guidance counselor that ensure that they will get into the right and appropriate educational placement when they went back home. Family, we sadly, in many of our systems, by removing young people from their families, putting them far away, we do everything that we can to actually decrease the chance of strong permanency and family relationships. And before close to home, I believe it used to be around 56% of young people had struggled in returning back to their home. And many of them finished up actually placement in child welfare or necessarily because we didn't do a good job of family engagement from the beginning. Close to home, again, provided the opportunity and the tools to do so. And as you can see, increase the likelihood of young people going to their families. And then the engagement in pro-social activities, which I will try to talk more later on. Close to home is not just about the facilities, it's really about what you guys are doing today in such a great, amazing way. I mean, our juvenile justice systems, sadly, are actually based on punishment and suppressing behavior. We know there's actually nothing worse that we could do on behalf of a young person than doing that. What we need to do is to encourage their creativity and allow them to actually showcase in as many opportunities as possible pro-social behavior and new ways of thinking, as you guys are doing today with the arts. The next slide. So lessons learned, and again, this is a tip sheet, very short. I think there's some folks in the audience, like Vidya and others from Columbia University, who actually could provide further support if you guys have further questions, or I'm always available. We learned that actually close to home, in particular a movement from large institutions that depend on hardware to institutions that actually are built around relationships and staff safety, as we used to call it, are going to have challenges. And to do it well, you need a robust oversight. And I think the state and the city learned maybe too late, or for at least quickly enough, that there had to be a new set of standards and practices that had to be in place before the program could be open. We actually did it afterwards. Community engagement. I think this webinar is a great, and town hall meeting is a great example of the stuff in hindsight that we should have done better. We came up with a plan between the city and the state that was loosely informed by those with lived experiences and by the communities that we wanted to impact positively, but we didn't do enough in actually tapping into the creativity and thinking of the communities where actually where our young people come from. In most recent years, community-specific initiatives are actually taking place that I think are improving close to home further. Aftercare, time in residential care is not a magic bullet, and again, it's actually hardly ever effective unless it's limited and it's actually built around relationships and providing opportunity for young people to try new skills and connect to others. And that has to be done with intentionality from day one. And it's actually more important the time in aftercare and community support than the short time in residential care. And again, building on number three, continuity of care. A continuity of philosophy between what will happen for young people in the community should permeate the design of the programs in terms of residential care, which is something that we didn't do, but hopefully Chicago and Illinois will get better. The next one. I think that's it. I think you guys had a set of questions that you wanted to talk about in the discussion.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for your presentation. To close it out with a couple questions, how important is the size and location of placements for these successful outcomes for you?
So size is important, and the Any Casey Foundation has for many years writing about the concept of small is beautiful. And again, I think I mentioned before, I mean, you guys know this. This work is all about relationships. We thrive when we can connect to others who make us feel safe, who can express care, can challenge our growth, can provide support, can allow us to share power and expand our possibilities. And that can only happen in small settings. So that's one important aspect of it. Second, location is essential. As I mentioned before, close to home allowed for the work among family and young people from day one, something that was never allowed in our old system where young people would be hours away from their families. But I would want to make a caveat. I mean, location and size are not enough. If we want to build the right relationship, we need the right staff that actually kind of reflect the values of the communities that we serve. And that's something that is important for anyone to keep in mind. Again, location is important, but it's not enough. I ran facilities in New York City that actually looked like a youth prison before 2012, where young people were actually just looking out of their window to the community and had never had a chance to connect to others. Close to home was very intentional, where I think I mentioned before, regarding education and any other opportunity, where the services, whenever possible, were actually performed and made available within the community settings, or people who will come to the facility. So young people had the unique chance of being able to go to school in the community, the unique chance to actually go to their doctors in the community, the unique chance to actually go for home visits in the community in a very intentional way before they could go fully home in aftercare.
Oh yeah, that sounds absolutely amazing. How do youth and communities stay safe in this less security-driven environment?
Yeah, I think again, we in justice have wrongly believed that safety is usually achieved by suppressing the behavior of others, or actually sadly sometimes, incarcerating them or separating them or even isolating them. Those things actually don't help anyone do better in society. So a significant amount of the effort and time in the design of close to home was less about suppressing behavior, but actually about encouraging behavior. In a typical home, young people will meet early in the morning and they on their own will run a group about what they wanted to achieve, how could each other support each other. They will actually have a very detailed schedule of activities, particularly around arts and music and sports, that will take every minute of their day. And they will have plenty of opportunities to connect to community leaders and community resources. That intentionality, I think, is essential. We also made a decision that instead of spending, like we usually do in juvenile justice, millions of dollars in hardware and fences and locks, we invested that money in staffing. So the Close to Home program had a very rich staffing component. In many of the homes, one staff for every 3 young people to allow for that connectivity and supervision that will ensure community safety. We made mistakes and we had our challenges at the beginning where some young people weren't able, as to be expected, because the staff wasn't as diligent or as engaged as they should have been. But we course corrected and actually eventually figured it out.
Oh yeah, that sounds amazing. And a part of every campaign is the ups and downs. But what matters is like how we work through it, especially working through it together. And that leads into the last question: what aspects of NYC's new system are you most proud of?
Yeah. Before I go to that one, I think there's no one more important for us for an effort like this one to be sustainable than you guys. I mean, the young people and the advocates. Leaders could be put in a difficult position, but we need more opportunities to showcase the talent and power and beauty of the young people that we serve, not just the mistakes they make once in a while. And sadly, sometimes that's what media does. What I'm the most proud of Close to Home, I mean, I'm proud that actually I'm here with you guys, talking about something that you could take on and build on and improve and make better on behalf of young people and families in Illinois. I think the thing that I'm the most proud of is that eventually Close to Home moved from being just a juvenile justice effort to becoming an effort of many, many others. If you were to think about Close to Home today, many agencies, for example, the Department of Education, the Child Welfare Department, the New York City Department for Youth and Community Development, the Department of Cultural Affairs, many of those departments actually began becoming stakeholders in Close to Home. They actually had budget items connected to Close to Home. And I think it really exemplified that young people don't need a juvenile justice system. They need an ecology and a network of agencies and communities and adults and peers working together on their behalf.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for showing us that a prison-free world, a prison-free Illinois is possible, and connecting it back to Rhoda's poem that we heard at the beginning is that when youth are cared for as youth, and young people who are growing and still developing with familial support, community support, rather than being punished as if they're adult criminals, they're able to stay in school and they're able to partake. They're able to stay in school and not partake in sort of the violences that seemingly justify the existence of prison. So thank you so much for bringing that out, especially in a way that we can systemically implement that. And I'm going to pass it back to Anne Marie, who's going to introduce our next speaker.